All right, we're live over here. So I thought today we're going to do something a little different than what we usually do. Somebody asked me this week to speak about the month of Cheshvan, so I did some research into the month. I know it's kind of trending month, learning about the horoscope. It's exciting. So I did a little research into the month of Cheshvan, so I thought we could talk about that. If it's something that people enjoy, maybe we can do it with other months as well, because it was definitely interesting to look into. So it is definitely, some people don't know that there is a Kabbalistic origin to the concept of horoscopes, and that months have a certain energy. To take it further and to say like, oh, if you're born in this month and this time, that's a whole different story. But like the concept of a month having a certain mazel, a certain energy, does have a Jewish source. The earliest source for this is from the Sefer Yetzirah, which is one of the oldest, or maybe the oldest book of Kabbalah. The Sefer Yetzirah is attributed to different authors. Some people attribute it even to Avram Avinu, but we don't really know who for sure wrote the Sefer Yetzirah, but it is a very ancient book of Kabbalah. And it is specifically there that it starts talking about the month. And he doesn't just talk about the mazel of the month, which is like the horoscope. We also go into many, many more details about the month. Each month has certain letters that are connected to it, certain letters of the Jewish alphabet. Each month has certain body parts that are connected to it. So it's just like really fascinating how there is like a lot of each month definitely has like a certain very strong energy. And then after the Sefer Yetzirah, also another source that you can look into that sort of expands on this is the Bnei Yissaschar. He expands on it based on the Sefer Yetzirah. And then more recently, it's become popular because Rabbi Dov Bar Pinson, put out a series of books, and he actually has a whole book for each month. So if you really want to explore, you can go into that. But someone asked me to speak about Cheshvan. And Cheshvan specifically is one of those harder months because it is, it's not a month that has any, in Tishrei, there's obvious energy of the month of Tishrei because we have all the Yomim Tovim, and there's that whole experience of the month of Tishrei. Hanukkah's coming up. Kislev, we know, is a month of light, light in the darkness, light overwhelming the darkness. Nisan is a month of freedom. So these are obvious energies of the month. But when it comes to Cheshvan, Cheshvan is actually called Mar Cheshvan because there are no holidays in this month, and there aren't even any fast days. There's not even any, there's no very significant days in the month of Cheshvan. And Cheshvan it's this transitional time. We have this high of the month of Tishrei, and then it's sort of just okay, back into life and transition back into regular life. Yaakov halach ladarka, we go on our way, and we're supposed to take the energy of the month of Tishrei and bring it into our lives, but it can be difficult to we change the clock, it's getting darker earlier. There's definitely maybe a little bit of a down feeling as we move into the month of Cheshvan, as is symbolized by its name, Mar Cheshvan, which it's not always called Mar Cheshvan, you could just call it Cheshvan, but Mar being bitter, that doesn't feel very positive. So we're going to explore a little bit the name of the month. We're going to explore some big events that happened in this month, and maybe taking from the name and the horoscope and all these different things, we can find some sort of direction that helps us deal with this transition. How do we deal with this state of transition and down coming from the month of Tishrei? Leading into the month, we'll be going into Kislev, which is exciting. We have things to look forward to in Kislev, but how do we sort of deal with the time that we're in right now? And so we'll maybe take some inspiration from different events in this month. So before we get into the name of the month, actually, it's an interesting thing to note that in the Torah itself, there are no names of the months. The months are referred to not by their names, they're referred to by their number. So The month of Cheshvan is the eighth month from Nisan. So it is the eighth month. And in the Torah, it doesn't have its name. The names of the Jewish months were actually established in the Babylonian exile. So that's where they come from. They're not Hebrew. They're I don't know if the language is Persian or Babylonian, but I think they might be Persian because that was a language that was spoken in the Babylonian exile, but I'm not sure exactly what the actual language is, but they come from the time of the Babylonian exile. So in the Tanakh, there are no references to the names of the month. But there is actually one place where Cheshvan is called by a name, and the name that it's called in the Torah, it's in Navi, is called the Bull. Where does it talk about this month of Bull? It says B'chodesh Bull is talking about when Shlomo HaMelech completed building the first Beis HaMikdash. So the first Beis HaMikdash was actually completed in the month of Cheshvan, which is the month of Bull. Why is it called Bull? It's because Bull means drops, and it's a reference to the Mabul. The Mabul started on Yod Zayin Cheshvan, and then Noach was finally able to leave the Teva a whole year and 10 days later on Chav Zayin Cheshvan. So the Mabul had its effects for an entire year, but it began in Cheshvan and it was finished, like completely finished in the month of Cheshvan as well. So it was referred as this month of Bull. And Shlomo HaMelech finishes building the first Beis HaMikdash in the month of Cheshvan. But he decides not to dedicate the Beis HaMikdash yet, and he's going to wait a year until the month of Tishrei to dedicate the Beis HaMikdash. Maybe because there's different reasons given, but Tishrei was maybe he was waiting for a more special month. Also, Tishrei is a time when all the Jewish people come to the Beis HaMikdash, so it's a good time to dedicate it when everyone's being El Regel anyway. So Cheshvan sort of missed out on this opportunity for dedication of the Beis HaMikdash. So it says in the Medrash that Hashem promises to the month. The month feels a little left out. I could have had this special day, right? It doesn't have any special days, and he could have had the special day of dedication of the first Beis HaMikdash. So Hashem promises the month of Cheshvan that the third Beis HaMikdash will be dedicated in the month of Cheshvan. So that's what the Medrash says about this month of Cheshvan, that the first Beis HaMikdash was not dedicated, but the third one will be dedicated in the month of Cheshvan. So far we've spoken about the fact that the Mabul occurred in the month of Cheshvan. We have the completion of the Beis HaMikdash, but not its dedication. And then another event that is sort of mentioned in the Torah as happening in this month is another, what we might look at as a more negative event, which is that right after Shlomo HaMelech was his son Rechavam. And when Rechavam went to be crowned as the next king of the Jewish people, he went to Shiloh to be anointed. Someone stood up and he said, no, we don't, the majority of the Jewish people don't want you to be our king. This was Yeroboam ben Nevat, and they broke away from Yehuda. The reasoning for this mainly was tax purposes, that they basically, Shlomo HaMelech closed off all entrances of Yerushalayim except for one, and so that everyone had to go through this one entrance where there were people collecting like tolls. And the Jewish people wanted, the Shevet Yehuda, the other Shvatim wanted more gates to be open, and Shlomo HaMelech refused, and then they thought maybe his son would agree, but his son did not agree, and Yerovam comes and breaks away from the kingdom. And Yerovam is left with a bit of a problem. What his problem is that the Jewish people every year go to the Beis HaMikdash to be Ola Regel, and that's a big part of our ritual. And specifically, in the year of Hakel, when the entire nation would gather, sort of the highlight of the year was that during the period of Hakel, the king would read from the Sefer Torah, and the entire nation would listen. And he was scared that if his people go to Yerushalayim and they see Rechavam reading from the Torah, they're no longer it's gonna like spark in their heads that he's meant to be king, and they won't accept him as king. They won't accept Yeravam as king anymore. So his big mistake that he did was that he basically built 2 calves in like golden calves in the territory of Yisrael, and he made a new Yontif that they would go celebrate. He sort of pushed off Sukkot. Instead of being in Tishrei, he pushed it off to Cheshvan. So now there's this big Jewish holiday in Cheshvan in Shevet Yisrael. And we see from there is basically the splintering of the Jewish people, and we haven't been united. We haven't had those 10 tribes. Like, think about 10 versus 2 tribes. We haven't had the majority of the Jewish people united since then. We lost the bulk of the Jewish people from that point. So it's seen as a very, very tragic thing that this happened, that there was this splintering of the Jewish people. And we see again that it's connected to this month of Cheshvan. So as we're looking at all these different things that happened in the month of Cheshvan, we could sort of start drawing some parallels together. We have the Mabul beginning, but then we also have the Mabul ending, and Noach being able to go out into this new cleansed world, right? So we have the negative, sort of, the harshness of the Mabul beginning, and we have the rectification with the Mabul ending. We have the sort of the breaking apart of the Jewish people and the disjointedness of the Jewish people, but then we also have the consecration of the third temple, which is going to ultimately unite the entire Jewish people, right? So we see like we have these 2 factors playing out the entire, through the energy of this month. And even if we look at the word mar, which we referred to before, the word mar meaning bitterness, it's just 2 letters, so it's an easy scramble. You don't even have to use your brain at all to like scramble it, just read it backwards. Mar is the same word as rum. And rum is a very positive word. It's a language of exaltedness, of being elevated, of being high up. So we have these, anytime, I think part of the message of this month and the energy that we bring into it is that anytime we have some sort of negative thing going on, or anytime that we're encountering some sort of thing that feels bitter or not so pleasant, it comes together with its rectification, right? The rectification is always there in the same space. That nothing is just bitter for no reason. In Tanya, we talk about the difference between different kinds of negativity, different types of sadness. There's a sadness that is called atzvos, which is depression. I think maybe Mrs. Collinson is actually up to this right now in the every other week. I believe that you're learning that that's the chapters that you're up to now. But there's the concept of sadness, which is depression, that kind of sadness is a very unproductive sadness. Within atzvos, there is very little potential for transforming the sadness into something that is positive. There's very little potential. Atzvos is a state of depression that sucks you into it and self-perpetuates. It's that depression that feels, in a way, almost feels good for our ego, to be in this state of really strongly feeling myself in the depths of darkness. And so within atzvos, there isn't potential for transformation. But that he sort of contrasts that with the idea of mirirus, which is bitterness, which is what we said the month is called, mar. It's not called a sad month, it's called a mar month, a month of bitterness. That within bitterness, there is potential for transformation. So you can take, when something is bitter, it means that it's not that I'm getting sucked into the state of sadness, but rather I am in a state of, which is not positive, but it's enough, there's enough energy within that I can transform that bitterness into something positive. And one of my favorite mashalim that the Alter Rebbe gives in Tanya is that he talks about the fact that you can have, and he speaks about it somewhere else, but also he's speaking about this in a different context, but I think it works so well over here as well, is that when you're cooking, So you can make food that is sweet, and everyone likes, it's easy to make sweet food. Everyone likes sweet food. It's easy. The first food that a baby eats, its mother's milk is sweet, and so naturally we're all attracted to that taste of sweetness. But I think especially as we get older and our palates become maybe a little more sophisticated, sometimes we don't just want sweet food, but if someone can take some flavors that on their own would not be so tasty, like bitterness, like bitter flavors, spicy, all of those kind of flavors, and you're able to work with them and transform them in a dish and create a balanced dish that is not just sweet, but also has elements of something spicy or something bitter, then it's a much more interesting meal that you're gonna have, and it's going to taste really good, right? If you know how to utilize that bitterness. So, and it's like, in a way, I always think when let's say, even if I'm baking something that is sweet, I'm always putting something into it that is gonna counteract that sweetness, right? Salt or sour or something to make it taste better. So that is, or to make it taste more complex. So there's a certain complexity and beauty that comes when you're not just working in the realm of sweetness, but when we're working in the realm of bitterness and transforming that bitterness into something that's positive. So we can say that part of the theme of this month is that transformation that begins from bitterness, that maybe we're feeling a little bit down about certain things, or we feel a little bit stuck about certain elements in our life, or we're feeling a little bit of, that lack of spirituality as I'm moving out of the month of Tishrei, where I made so much time for my connection with Hashem, and now I'm back at work or back in my regular life, and it's much more difficult to create a feeling of closeness with God, and that leaves me with a sense of bitterness. As long as it's bitterness and not despair, like atzvus, there's always room to work with that and to transform that. And we see that from the Mabul itself, that the Mabul was quite a devastating world event, right? The entire world is wiped out. That's not doesn't seem like a very positive chesed type of thing. It's much more of a gevura kind of move from Hashem's part, just wiping out the entire world. But the purpose of the Mabul, we didn't have a class last week, but if we did, we probably would have spoken about this. The purpose of the Mabul was to cleanse. The purpose of the Mabul was to change the earth, to change the very earth that we live on, and to change the people. An interesting thing to think about. Before the Mabul, the world was very, very different. On some level, the world was much more godly because life was very supernatural in a sense. Nature didn't completely settle until after the Mabul. So before the Mabul, people are, if you're reading the Torah 2 weeks ago and last week, it's listing the generations and the lives that people lived. And, 800 years, 700 years, 800 years, 900, people are living like these very, 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 very long lives. So obviously that means that there's some sort of where does that long life come from? That comes from Hashem, because Hashem keeps going, so the human being can also just keep going and have almost that sense of much more infinity in your life. And feeling the supernatural in your life. But at the same time, we see that the entire existence was in a very tenuous state. Because when they messed up, what did Hashem do? He literally destroyed the entire thing. Right? Hashem just said, you messed up, guys, I'm destroying the whole situation. I'm just getting rid of all of you. We'll save one family and we're going to get rid of the rest of you. Imagine how many times in history since then that could have happened. That most of the people on earth were not necessarily acting aligned with God. It could have probably happened many more times. But our world, the very fabric of our world, has changed based on the Mabul. What the Mabul did was it enabled us to have a much more grounded godliness. So instead of sort of being in a semi-supernatural state, but not really embodying the godliness in the world itself and in our bodies. And therefore, the world is almost disposable, right? The world is almost disposable. The people are disposable because the people haven't really embodied the godliness. It's much more transcendent. What the Mabul did is that it allowed the godliness to really permeate into the earth, to settle into the earth and into people. And after the Mabul, a person is able to be much more godly. So maybe we're living the shorter lives, but in those lives, we're able to actually have a much more grounded godliness and draw real godliness into the earth. And this is why, if we think about the rainbow that came after the Mabul, what is a rainbow? A rainbow is a reflection of light, right? That's what it is. It's a reflection of, it's the light reflecting. After the Mabul, the world is now able to reflect light back onto Hashem. That's what, through that cleansing process of the Mabul, the world is now able to re-reflect the light back onto Hashem. And that's the symbolism of the rainbow. So it seems like a very negative thing, but it ends up having very positive results. And as the Alter Rebbe famously teaches about the Mabul, that what is the Mabul in our daily lives? The Mabul in our daily lives are all the worries that we have about just living. It's hard to just live. There's making money and taking all. I would think about, I think the way that we would describe it is the mental load, right? The mental load of existing, and especially as women, right? All the things that we carry in our heads, that is the Mabul. That is the flood that comes and distracts us. And we could align that with just that feeling of mar, of bitterness, that these are not pleasant feelings, all of these worries that we have about getting through life. These don't feel pleasant. And they come and they distract us, and they also specifically distract us from being able to serve God. They distract us from being able to focus on our relationship with Hashem. The more, I've definitely felt this personally in my life, that the more, let's say, responsibilities I've had to take in my life, the less I'm able to focus on my relationship with Hashem. So even like an example I can think about, like when I have a lot of small children in my house, or when as a mother, there are many days when I could technically daven a longer davening. Because, I don't know, the baby's napping, or you have maybe a few moments in time. But any mother who has a baby at home will tell you that a napping baby is not space to do anything, right? Like, there's always the potential of it waking up. And there's just like that thought, like, I can't like add another thing right now into my life of making the time to daven. So even if I technically have can steal the 10 minutes that it would take, it's very, very overwhelming because we are flooded. That's the Mabul, is that flooding. We're totally flooded, we're totally overwhelmed. And this can be caused by anything that's coming up in your life that's taking up a lot of space in your head. It's that ultimate flooding. And especially the world that we live in now, we are extra flooded because we're constantly being flooded with information. I learn with a few people once a week or once every other week. And this time we decided to learn last night. And it was very intentional because I said, we're going to learn, and I'm going to put my phone away for 3 hours. And instead of constantly refreshing the same page of news that is going to have no impact if I refreshed it or not, right? To look at if there's any update of something, I'm going to be learning something. And I wouldn't do that if I wasn't in that space, right? So as long as I'm being flooded, it's taking me away from my avodas Hashem. And it takes much more conscious choice to focus on my service of God. And this flood is this energy of this month of Cheshvan, where we're feeling overwhelmed by everything that's going on. And the Alter Rebbe teaches us that what happens in the flood, where does Noach go? He goes into the Teva. And as he goes into the Teva, what happens when you're in a boat? So when you're in a boat, you're on top of the water. And the higher the water rises, what happens to the boat? The higher the boat goes. So the boat is buoyant and it's floating on top of the water. The higher the water rises, the higher the boat goes. If we set ourselves up in a boat, in a cocoon, in a safe space to encounter these floods, then not only is the flood not going to overwhelm us, not going to drown us, but it actually elevates us and brings us to a higher space. That's the idea of the flood, is that if I set myself up with a teva, and Chassidus teaches us that teva also means words, and the words are the words of Torah and Tefillah, where I make sure to cocoon myself, to encase myself within a space of godliness, and I prepare myself for meeting the flood. Then the flood doesn't just overwhelm me, it actually allows me to go higher. And the result of the flood is that it purifies. The result of the water is that it purifies. But it takes me setting myself up to be able to do that. And that is connected to this month of Cheshvan when the flood begins. And then when we look at the letters in Cheshvan, if you split up, the van is sort of like the suffix of the word. So we see Sivan also has the vav nun that is at the end. So I'm not an expert at this Babylonian language, but van is like the suffix. And then the first two letters are chash. Chash in Hebrew means silent. Silent. And there are a number of different types of silence that we can encounter. Sometimes we can be silent because we're in pain, or we don't have words to express ourselves from a place of pain, and a place of frustration. But there's also a very positive type of silence. The positive type of silence is the silence that comes when I truly and totally incorporate something fully into myself. When I understand an idea in a real way, when I take something into my life so that it really becomes a part of me, that leads to a silence. What do we mean by the silence? It's a certain state of tranquility where there is no resistance. Resistance is noise. So when something is not completely settled in me, there is noise, there's resistance. But when something is fully incorporated and fully settles within me, then I'm able to have chash, I'm able to have silence. And it's the mabul that enables, through its purifying and cleansing process, it's the mabul that enables us to be able to really internalize something into ourselves in a full and deep way so that we're able to come to this space of chash, of silence, but very positive silence. Okay, now moving a little bit away from the mabul, the zodiac of the month of Cheshvan is the Akrav, which is the Scorpio. That's the season that we're in right now. And the scorpion doesn't really have the most positive connotation. In general, reptiles are not so beloved, but a scorpion is not the friendliest of animals. And it's very interesting. It says in the Gemara that what's the difference between, so scorpions are often lumped in together with snakes in the Torah, right? Nachashim, Akravim, they go together. But what's the difference between this snake and the scorpion? The snake's venom is a hot venom. The scorpion's venom is a cold venom. Now, I don't know if that's scientifically true, but what does this mean? It says in the Gemara that if you're in the middle of davening and there's like a snake around, you should continue. You don't stop your tefillah. You're in the middle of Shemona Esrei and you see a snake, you don't stop your tefillah. But if you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei and you see a scorpion, stop. Stop davening, go away, and you'll have to start again. Which is a very interesting Gemara. And if we look a little bit deeper into the snake versus the scorpion, we can understand. If you're in the middle of davening and you're bitten by a creature that injects some hot venom into you, What is hot venom? Hot venom means that it's talking about like some sort of like emotional or passionate sort of desire that overwhelms your thoughts that come into your head that are not good thoughts, not holy thoughts. They're unholy thoughts, but they're powered by desire and powered by passion. So if that sort of thought comes into your head, you have the ability to overwhelm that thought, to push it away, and you could continue davening, right? So if we're inspired by some sort of passionate negative thought, then there's the ability to push it away. But if you're in the middle of davening and what comes into your head, the cold venom is injected into your head. What is the cold venom? The cold venom is cynicism. It's doubt. It's like intellectual turning off of the heart and like poisoning of the mind. That's what the cold venom is of the scorpion. That stop davening, right? That's not as easily overpowered. You can't daven while you're in the state of being cynical, or while you're in the state of what we might sometimes call like an amalek state, where our heart is turned off and we're just cold to everything. You need to deal with that first before you can then go back and daven. And in a sense, the scorpion's venom is a lot more dangerous and threatening than the hot venom of the snake. And I think it's pretty simple to understand because, and you see this a lot there are two different types of people. Let's say you'll have people who have questions about Judaism and faith, or who've grown up religious and are struggling with their Judaism. So there's two different types of questions that people can have. You can have people who are very angry and very passionately against Judaism. And they have a lot of anger and they have a lot of energy in their rebuttals. And that kind of energy, though, that kind of person you can talk to. You can speak to them. You can take that anger and their space too. It's energy. Anger is energy, right? Like heat is energy. And so as long as the heat is there, it just needs to be directed into the right direction and it could be rectified. It could be saved. When it comes to coldness, when it comes to the scorpion's bite, it's a much more dangerous kind of venom because you can't redirect it. There's nothing there. And it's kind of scary when there's nothing there. When someone goes into a state of apathy, it's a lot more dangerous than when they're angry. And so I think this is just a message of the month of Cheshvan, is that this is something that we have to look out for in ourselves. Am I becoming apathetic? Am I not allowing myself to feel anything? Am I just embracing a world of cynicism and apathy and coldness? And often this comes about because we're scared of the anger, and so we just push it away and instead go to the apathy. But the anger, in a sense, it might look less scary it might look more scary on the outside because it takes, the difference between the two is one of them I feel like I'm more in control than the other. When I'm in a state of coldness, I'm contained, I'm in control, versus when I'm overwhelmed by the energy of the anger or of the snake, the heat, then I feel sort of out of control. And so we're scared of being out of control. But at the end of the day, sometimes we have to let ourselves have maybe a few moments of being out of control so that we can then regroup and recontrol, rather than turning everything off, shutting off the whole system and reverting to apathy. It's a much more scarier venom that we have to be on the lookout for. But as we said, if this is so this is something that there's just like an awareness that if this is an energy in the month of Cheshvan, right? This is the horoscope, the zodiac sign of the month of Cheshvan. It's something that we have to be sort of on alert for in the month of Cheshvan. But we said that within everything that we've been discussing, that the rectification is built right into the month as well. So if there's the negative side of it, then the positive side. If there's the mar, then there's also the rum. If there's the bitter, then there's also the exalted. If there's the mabul, there's also the elevation that we get after the mabul, the purification that we get after the mabul. If there's the splitting of the Jewish people, there's also the unity of the Jewish people. So if we have this energy of coldness, what is something else that we have in the month of Cheshvan? And this is the fact that it is the 8th month. The 8th month. 8 is connected to the supernatural, right? We have 7 is nature. The world was created with 7. There are 7 days of creation, and 7 is a number that we see with the 7 spheres, that everything is found within 7. Nature is found within 7. And then we have the 8th, and the 8th is beyond 7. It's beyond nature, and we can say it refers to the energy of Mashiach, but also in general, we can say it refers to just the supernatural, and to surrendering to the supernatural. And so we can say that what is the antidote even to the scorpion's bite? Even to the scorpion's bite, which has no way of really being rectified. We can't rectify coldness. You can't rectify apathy. What is the antidote to the scorpion's bite is beyond nature. That even the biggest cynic, when they encounter something that is so obviously beyond nature, that is what breaks the cynicism. That's when you can no longer deny that something is true and something is real. When it's so obviously from out of the system. That destroys that cynicism. And so the month of Cheshvan is connected both to this energy of apathy and cynicism, but also to the energy of the supernatural. And like we said, the third Beis HaMikdash being dedicated in this month. So we have both of these going on, that there, even though we have to look out for perhaps this negative state, we also have to believe in the fact that there is the power of the positive, and that when Mashiach comes, it's going to transform even the coldest of people, even the coldest of hearts will be able to be turned over when Mashiach comes. Let's see how much time we have. Okay. And we'll do one last little point of this month. So we said that in the Sefer Yetzirah, it also talks about the fact that the month has a certain letter, that each month has a certain letter. So the letter that is brought for the month of Cheshvan is the letter Nun. And Nun is one of the letters that is a double letter. There's the Nun that is used if it's in the beginning or middle of a word, and then there's the final Nun. And this goes right along with the theme of everything that we've spoken about until now, where we have the bitter and we have the sweet. We have the brokenness and we have the rectification. So with the nun itself is bent over, right? The beginning nun it's a bent letter. The bottom sort of comes in, and it could refer to the word naifel, fall, right? It could be like, it could have like this negative connotation as well, this being in a bent over, broken kind of state. But the nun also has another variation, and that's with the straight leg. So within the nun, there's the potential to straighten the leg. So it doesn't have to remain broken, it can be straightened out. And that is sort of the focus, like we said this whole time, of our Avodah of Cheshvan, is to straighten out the nun, to turn the bent nun into a straight nun, to take the things in our lives that seem to be like they're a little bit fallen, to take our own energy that perhaps can be a little bit down or a little bit bitter, and to rectify it. Because even in that letter itself, it's the fact that it's presented as this double letter, as we mentioned before, is that the medicine is already there. In every element that we have over here, we have maybe something not so positive, but being completely and totally one with and integrated with its own refuah. So if there's something that we can take into the next few weeks that we have of Cheshvan, is tapping into the healing that is present in all the broken moments, and looking and seeing where can I find the medicine that's already here in this moment, even when it seems like it is not so positive. And also that general idea of riding the waves of the Mabul, of elevating ourselves, allowing these experiences to enable us to transcend instead of being flooded and drowning. So yeah, those are just some thoughts for this month. Thank you.